The safety card in the seat back pocket spells it out plainly. In the event of a loss of cabin pressure, oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling, and those masks will supply roughly 15 minutes of air. 15 minutes. On a flight, that might be crossing an ocean. On a plane cruising 7 miles above the Earth. The number sounds like a dangerous compromise, like the aircraft is critically under-equipped, and if something goes wrong at the wrong time, 15 minutes is all that separates you from suffocation. Most people assume there's a tank of compressed oxygen hidden somewhere in the ceiling, and 15 minutes is simply all the gas that fits inside it. That's wrong. There are no tanks. There is no compressed gas. And the way the airplane actually gets oxygen to your mask is one of the most violent chemical reactions anywhere on the aircraft. At 38,000 feet, the atmosphere outside the aircraft is around minus 60 degrees Celsius. When the pressurized cabin air suddenly meets that environment, the moisture in the cabin flash condenses. A thick, cold fog fills the cabin in under a second. Passengers who've been through it consistently describe their first thought as smoke. It's not smoke. It's the temperature differential making the air itself visible. Then the ceiling panels snap open. Yellow silicone cups tumble out on white cords, swinging above every row. They don't fall into your lap. They hang loosely at chest height, held in place by a short lanyard, and nothing happens. No hiss of pressurized air, no rush of gas. The masks are dangling, and they're completely inert. The pressure in your ears hits next, a deep, painful pop as the air in your sinuses tries to equalize with a cabin that's rapidly thinning. The temperature drops. The sound is overwhelming, a roar of wind through whatever breach caused the decompression, the engines spooling down, the rattle of everything loose in the cabin. Then you reach up, grab the mask, and pull it toward your face. The safety briefing has told you to do this 100 times. Most people assume the pull is just to stretch the tube far enough to reach. It isn't. That pull is doing something mechanical, something you can feel as a faint click transmitted through the cord. The moment you feel it, the oxygen starts flowing. But what's flowing and where it's coming from is nothing like what you'd expect. When you pull the mask, the lanyard transfers about 2 to 4 pounds of force, less than it takes to twist open a tight jar lid, into a retaining pin seated inside a small stainless steel canister hidden in the ceiling panel. The pin slides free. A spring-loaded striker, held in place for years or even decades, slams forward into a percussion cap. The cap contains a tiny charge of lead styphnate, the same class of primer used in a firearm cartridge. It detonates on impact, producing a focused spark. That spark doesn't open a valve, it starts a fire. Inside the canister is a tightly packed block of sodium chlorate mixed with iron powder. The spark ignites the iron, which burns, not smolders, burns, at an internal temperature of roughly 600 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than the inside of a commercial pizza oven. The heat from the burning iron forces the sodium chlorate to decompose, splitting apart into 2 substances: sodium chloride, table salt, and pure oxygen gas. The oxygen flowing through that mask is being manufactured in real time, inches above your head, by a chemical fire burning at 600 degrees inside a steel canister, roughly the size of a can of tennis balls. The canister's exterior reaches 260 degrees Celsius, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than your kitchen oven at its maximum setting. And once the reaction starts, it cannot be stopped. There's no off switch, no throttle, no way to pause it. The candle burns until every gram of sodium chlorate has been converted to salt and gas. That takes 12 to 22 minutes, depending on the mass of the chemical core. But at 600 degrees, the decomposition of sodium chlorate isn't perfectly clean. Trace amounts of chlorine gas form as a byproduct, corrosive to lung tissue even in small concentrations. If it reached the mask, the device built to save your life would be damaging the airways of the person wearing it. To prevent this, engineers mix roughly 4 to 5% barium peroxide into the chemical core. The barium peroxide acts as a scavenger, binding to the chlorine before it can escape the canister, converting it into harmless barium chloride and releasing additional oxygen in the process. The toxin becomes fuel. The gas passes through a ceramic filter to cool it and strip out particulates, then flows through tubing to the mask. That faintly metallic, slightly burnt smell passengers report during real decompressions? That's the reaction. It's harmless. But to someone who doesn't know what's happening above their head, it smells exactly like an electrical fire. One last piece, the part of the safety briefing that confuses nearly everyone. Even though oxygen is flowing, the bag may not inflate. That sounds like a malfunction. It's not. The bag exists because of how the chemical generator delivers its supply, a continuous trickle of about 1.5 liters per minute, roughly the volume of a large soda bottle every 60 seconds. The bag catches that trickle while you exhale. When you inhale, you draw pure oxygen from the bag first. If your breath is deeper than what the bag collected, spring-loaded ports on the sides of the mask open and draw in ambient cabin air to fill the rest. The deepest part of your lungs gets concentrated oxygen. The rest gets whatever's available. The bag isn't broken when it lies flat. It's empty because you just breathed its contents. The alternative, compressed gas, has a fundamental problem. A centralized system requires high-pressure oxygen lines running the full length of the fuselage. If a line ruptures during a hard landing or gets severed by debris from an engine failure, pressurized oxygen feeds any nearby flame like a blowtorch. The system designed to keep passengers breathing would accelerate the very fire that threatens them. Chemical generators eliminate that risk entirely. A solid block of sodium chlorate is completely inert at room temperature. No plumbing, no pressurized lines, no connections between canisters. Each one sits in the ceiling for up to 20 years with zero maintenance and zero degradation in output. Scaled across 180 seats, the weight savings over compressed cylinders reaches hundreds of pounds, savings the aircraft collects on every flight for its entire operational life. The trade-off is total commitment. Once a generator fires, it's spent. If turbulence accidentally triggers the masks, every activated canister in the cabin has to be unbolted and replaced before the aircraft flies again. Engineers accepted that because pressurized oxygen lines running above 300 passengers was the alternative. Why 15 minutes is enough and why it's actually more air than the physics requires has nothing to do with chemistry. If this kind of engineering detail is what keeps you watching, subscribing takes 1 second. 15 minutes of air on a 14-hour flight sounds like a fatal shortfall. But landing isn't the goal. The masks don't need to keep you breathing until the plane reaches a runway. They need to keep you alive until the plane reaches air thick enough to breathe on your own. At 10,000 feet, the atmosphere contains enough oxygen to sustain human life without supplemental help. That's the target altitude. And the moment those masks deploy, the flight crew, wearing their own separate gaseous oxygen supply rated for hours, initiates an emergency descent. Thrust to idle, speed breaks up, nose down. The aircraft drops at 5,000 to 8,000 feet per minute, the height of the Empire State Building every 10 to 12 seconds. Here's the number that puts the 15-minute supply into perspective. At 40,000 feet, after an explosive decompression, the time of useful consciousness, the window before the brain stops functioning well enough to reach for the mask, is roughly 15 seconds. Not minutes, seconds. That's why the masks drop automatically. That's why the pilots already have their own masks on. And that's why the aircraft is designed to shed 30,000 feet of altitude as fast as aerodynamics allow. From 40,000 feet to 10,000 feet at emergency descent rates takes approximately 4 to 5 minutes. The chemical generator burns for 12 to 22. The 15-minute oxygen supply was never a limitation. It provides roughly 3 times more air than the physics of the descent demands. The system is elegant, inert for decades, then violent for exactly as long as the physics demands. But that safety depends entirely on one condition. The canister must be inside its insulated overhead housing when it fires. Remove it from that housing, and 260 degrees of surface heat and a continuous stream of pure oxygen become something else entirely. On May 11, 1996, a maintenance contractor removed 144 expired chemical oxygen generators from several aircraft undergoing service. Regulations required safety caps to be installed over the firing pins before the generators could be transported. The caps were never installed. The generators were packed into cardboard boxes and loaded into the forward cargo hold of ValueJet Flight 592, a DC-9 departing Miami. During the ground roll or shortly after takeoff, vibration shifted the cargo. A lanyard pulled, a firing pin released, a canister ignited inside a cardboard box in an unventilated hold with no fire suppression system. The 260-degree exterior ignited the packing material. The generator, functioning exactly as designed, pumped pure oxygen directly into the growing fire. The flames cascaded to the remaining canisters. Plume temperatures reached an estimated 3,300 degrees Fahrenheit. The fire melted the aluminum floor structure, severed the flight control cables, and breached the passenger cabin. All 110 people on board were killed. Chemical oxygen generators were banned as cargo on passenger aircraft. Every cargo hold in the commercial fleet was required to carry smoke detectors and active fire suppression systems. Those rules weren't written in engineering manuals, they were written in the Everglades. The next time you fly, look up at the ceiling panel above your seat. Behind it is a steel canister roughly the size of a tennis ball can, packed with sodium chlorate and iron powder, fitted with a percussion cap and a spring-loaded striker, connected to a yellow mask by a white cord. It has been sitting there, sealed, inert, needing nothing, possibly longer than you've been alive. If those masks ever drop and you pull one towards your face, you won't be opening a valve. You'll be pulling a firing pin, igniting a controlled chemical fire that will manufacture breathable air for exactly as long as it takes the aircraft to descend into atmosphere thick enough to do the job instead. 15 minutes. Not because that's all they could fit, because that's all you need. What's something else on an airplane you've always noticed, but never understood? Put it in the comments.